A lot of people wouldn't know this, but in federal prison, guards they don't like people with bad charges any more than we do, and they do their part when they can. Not all of them, not just like out here. Not everyone's willing to take certain risks and stuff, but when the right ones, when they get the opportunity to, they definitely do. And I'll always remember one of them. I would have never expected something like this from this particular guard. He was always real quiet, very by the book, but he didn't go out of his way to, fuck with you or anything like that. And this was in my first FCI. So having guys trying to sneak onto the compound with bogus charges is kind of a common thing. That's where it's going to happen more often than anywhere else. And it's not uncommon for them to just peek their head in the door and tell you that you got mail and to come down to the office and grab it. That way some of them, they don't want to stand there and boom out everybody's name at the top of their lungs. Some people will do that, some people won't. Some people will just write a list with everybody's name on it, and you got to come down there and see if you have mail. It depends. Not all guards are created equal, right? But this particular guard, on one of these days, that's what he did. He peeked into the door and he said, "Hey, you got mail in my office, come and grab it." This also happened to be at the time that a bus had just shown up, and there was a few natives that had came off of that bus, and one of them was in my unit. And I know that this guard knew that I had the compound for the natives at that time. But this was in such a way that he could get away with this, and it wouldn't put him in any kind of risk of being exposed or any kind of backlash or a blowback or anything like that, right? This kid came in, and I remember talking to him, and I asked him, I said, "Who all came here with you? Do you know if any of them have, bogus charges?" And I told him very specifically, I said, it's better to know these things right away so that we don't give them enough time to get situated, or get a weapon or anything like that. And he was like, no, we're all good. I talked to everybody and everybody's good. And Ron was like, okay, cool. Well, just so you know, and everybody else, y'all have X amount of days to get your paperwork. I said, you just got to ask for the counselor, to ask her for a computation sheet. It's going to have everything you need on it. And he was like, oh, okay, cool. And this is another thing, too. His computation was there the same day. So that had to have come from the counselor. It could only have came from the counselor. So I'm like, all right, that's pretty crazy. But anyways, so we get off account. They call chow, and everybody's getting ready to go to chow. And so I go down to the office, and everybody's just kind of milling about, standing around and going about their business. It's always just kind of just one of those times where everybody's just kind of kicking it. It was one of the peaceful times. Everybody's waiting to go somewhere. Everybody's waiting to go do something. But I peeked my head into the CO's office and I said, "Hey, you had some mail for me?" He says, "Yeah, here's your mail," and he hands it to me, right? And I look at it and I see me and this new kid share the same last name, but it's not the right number, and I know he knows that. And without thinking, I go to hand it back to him, and I said, "Hey, this isn't for me." And he was like, "No, that's your mail." And I was like, "Are you sure?" He's like, "Listen, that is your mail. I did my part." And I was like, "Okay." And I back out. And I'm looking at it and I'm like, it's this kid's computation sheet. I'm like, all right, cool. So I walk up to him, and we're all still waiting to go eat and stuff. So I go walking up to him and I said, here. He looks at it and he's like, what is it? I said, check it out, man. I said, open it up. It's like stapled closed. I said, open it up. I said, it's going to tell you your earliest release date, how much good time you got. So he immediately snaps it open. We go and we both lean over and we're looking at it. And it said something about he definitely did something against a minor. That's all I remember. And I looked at him, and he looks up at me, and because he was looking at everything, I knew exactly where to look, and he didn't, because this is his first time seeing that kind of paperwork. But he eventually realized that it said what he didn't want it to say, what he didn't want me to see what it said. And he looked up at me, and I looked at him, and I said, damn, man. I said, I thought you said you weren't fucked up. He's like, oh, it's an open case still, and I'm still fighting it, and she lied, and I could prove it, this and that. I said, all right, man. Well, I said, well, check it out. I was like, well, I'll get the bros together at chow time. We'll call a little meeting, and I said, we'll hear you out, all right? I said, all you got to do is just be honest, tell us the truth. We're going to find out anyways. I said, we'll go from there. And he was like, all right, yeah, that's cool, man. I said, all right. I said, now we're going to go eat. I said, go ahead and, get ready to go eat. I walked into the chow hall and I sat down and I said, there's a new guy in my unit up in the top left, 8-man. I said, he's got to go. And then a couple bros, they just looked at each other and they nodded. They both knocked on the table and they got up and they left. Within seconds, the deuces go off and all the COs go running out to my unit. Sure enough, they handcuff them all up and they walk them over to the shoe, and they everything goes back to normal. And I come walking back into my unit, and that CO had said something to me. He said something along the lines of, that's got to be a record. Yeah. And I just looked at him and I said, yeah. I said, definitely does. So yeah, they definitely, in the small ways that they can, where they feel like they're not going to put themselves at risk or risk their job, they will help. They will expose these guys and make sure that something does happen to them, because that's exactly what they deserve. It's not enough. It's not enough that they're just doing their time. That place is a meat grinder. We're just making sure nothing gets stuck on the sides.